Okay, I'd like to say welcome, welcome, welcome to Akom Kese 2020 virtual conference. We'd like to acknowledge and give thanks to Almighty God, our elders, ancestors, and deities for bringing us together for this occasion. The name of this session is the Young People's Meeting. Before we begin, just let's go over some norms of the session. We ask that everyone remains unmuted to allow for clear audio of all the participants. During the open discussions, we will ask you to type your name in the chat box to inform us that you wish to speak, and we will call on you. And during that time, we'll ask you to unmute yourselves at that time. If you have a question, comment, or concern, please type it in the chat box and it will be shared with our presenters during Q&A. Now, as you know, our group name is Akom Kese. The organization is dedicated to a comprehensive presentation and representation of Akan culture in the United States. And we work to facilitate this by fostering camaraderie, fellowship, and networking through all Akan in America, creating, maintaining, and strengthening friendships and familial connections, sharing wisdom, knowledge, and information that facilitates cultural growth and expression, showcasing the members of the Akan community, such as these lovely young people here today, and other individuals that are interested in the Akan culture, and to members of various shrine houses. This year will mark our 5th annual conference, and of course we have saved the best for last, as this is our last day of the conference, and we are happy that you are all here to join us. First presenter is my daughter, Asha Amoa. She is thrilled to be a part of the Akom Kese 2020. She currently holds an associate's degree in acting, a bachelor's degree in acting and dance performance, and is pursuing her master's in acting at the California Institute of Arts. At 23 years old, she's had a blessing of growing up in the Akom culture, and she is very excited to contribute to its future growth and development. Looks so stoic, doesn't she? Beautiful. Next, we have Afia Noche. Did I pronounce that correctly? Afia, you gotta unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay, good. She is 19 years old and a rising junior at Tufts University in Massachusetts, majoring in clinical psychology. Next, we have Apari Ajaman, who was born in 1991 after the passing of the late Nana Yao Peri Dinizulu. He, like most youth, never experienced the full penia of the Akan culture in America. I love that wording, sir. Operi has always experienced himself as somewhat an official therapist in his personal life. It was Opari's close involvement in participating in shrine work for various clients that set the foundation for his interest in mental and spiritual health. This led him to study psychology at CUNY York College, where he earned his bachelor's and eventually influenced his decision to study Vedic science at Maharishi, is that correct? International University?
Yeah, Maharishi.
Maharishi, where you earned his master's. You go, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Fabulous. He is now a meditation coach who utilizes different mindfulness techniques to help his clients navigate through past traumas and confront self-sabotaging mindsets. He started his company Magic Mirror X with hopes to help young people align their physical experience with their desired life. That sounds like a separate conference next year. So just know that we're coming for you, okay? So you can share some of this knowledge. It's wonderful.
I'll be ready.
Yeah, okay, okay, you've already committed, so that's good. He coaches clients to tap into their dormant potential of their unbounded beings. He credits his foundation to the Akan culture and wishes to spread knowledge he has learned outside of the culture to help everyday people with their own spiritual practice. And as our next presenter, we have Yaso, or Abu, as many know him. He has strong interest in butchering, traditional African clothing, and wrestling. Yao prides himself in prides himself on being strong in his cultural traditions, never folding or compromising it in today's dominant society, expressing it in his everyday life, and considers that his biggest flex. All right, let me see the flex. Go ahead. Yao's day-to-day consists of running his company, Prince Abu's Butchery. And last but not least, we have Deja Bandi. I think it was Deja Asantua Bandi. Is that correct? Deja Bandi is a 17-year-old military child. She is currently a senior at Grassfield High STEM Academy. In the fall, she plans to attend George Washington University Elliott School of International Affairs in Washington, D.C., majoring in international affairs and economics and minoring in political communications. Deja is passionate about creating an environment for leaders to emerge and the fight for mental health equality. That sounds like another presentation for next year, just so you know.
Mom, there's one more, Afia Tyus.
Afia Tyus, let me finish with Deja and let me make sure that I have her information here in front of me, which I do not. So where we left off, Deja is passionate about creating an environment for leaders to emerge and the fight for mental health equality. Her advocacy skills are highlighted throughout her leadership roles, such as National Military Youth of the Year for Boys and Girls Club. Deja is determined to make a difference, and that you already have, young lady. And Afia Tyus.
I just sent it to you. Look at your phone.
Okay, she just sent it. See, isn't technology wonderful? So of course, now I save the best for last. How about that? Okay. Did you send an email or?
Texted it to you.
Okay, you give me 1 minute. The beauty of technology. You guys have fabulous pictures, by the way, just so you know. Okay, give me 1 minute. See these pictures, I'm not seeing the actual bio. Okay, here we go. Nope, this is Afia. No, this is.
There's two Afias.
Yeah, this is not Tyus. I don't see Tyus.
Yes, it is, Mom.
Okay, give me 1 minute because apparently I'm technology challenged. Okay, finally, I have it. I apologize. Afia is on track to complete her undergraduate degree from Harvard in History of Science, African American Studies, and Economics in December of this year. Congratulations, sister. Post-grad, she will be pursuing a full-time offer with Boston Consulting Group and continue to work on her non-for-profit Hand in Hand in Washington, D.C. She is writing her senior thesis on Black women organizing against the food insecurity today, drawing from the experience of the Great Migration and the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program. I would love to get my hands on that and read that. Long term, she hopes to use her skills to begin closing the health disparities gap in advocating for holistic wellness. I welcome you all. I look forward to hearing all of your voices, and let's start.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Thank you for the introduction.
Welcome, everyone. We'll take it away.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for the warm and beautiful introduction, Ms. Amoa. My name is Deja Ama Asantua Bandi, but I go by Deja most commonly, and I'm so ecstatic to present to you all the Akom Kese virtual, due to the current circumstances, youth presentation by Asha Amoa, Afia Anoche, Yao So, Afia Tyus, and Operi Ajman, and myself. Now I'm going to share introductions. First, we have Operi Ajiman, who's 29 years old. And as we shared earlier today, he went to college and got his degree from CUNY New York College, and then followed suit after that and went to Mahir Rashi International University. Some of those are kind of difficult to pronounce, so please apologize in advance. And then next we have Afia Anoche, who's 19 years old and lives in Hamden, Connecticut. She attends Tufts University and is employed at Amazon. From there, we have Afia Tyus, who's 21 years old and lives in Washington, D.C., and goes to Harvard University and is working with Boston Consulting Group. And then you have myself, I'm Asantwa, I go by Deja, I live in Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm attending George Washington University online this semester. From there, we have Asha Moa. She lives in New York, and she attends MFA at California Institute of the Arts. And last but not least, we have Yao So, who's 25 years old and lives in New York and has his own company and is the CEO of his own company, Prince Abu's Butchery. So I'm so excited to welcome my counterparts to present to you all our presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Deja. So I am just going to tell you all a little bit about the purpose of this presentation and where we're going to take it. So over the past few weeks, we have had the opportunity to meet several times over Zoom and just discuss what's on the minds of people from the ages of basically 17 to 30. And so we're hoping to give you all a glimpse into the vision and perspective of the Akan youth who've been raised in this community in some way, shape, or form. And we're excited about it. The format of the presentation, we will have, Asha, can you go to the next slide? So we will have two topics. We'll be doing practicing Akan culture and protesting as Black Americans and visions for the future. At the end of each presentation, we're gonna have a 15-minute Q&A period. And of course, we can use more or less time as needed. And you will hear a separate slide from each of our different vantage points about what we think of the particular topic. Now, it took us a long time to get to those two topics, so bear with us, but we're excited about it. And so this first topic of practicing Akan culture as a Black American and protesting, we really came to as a way to reflect on the last few months of protests throughout the US, along with really just getting to know one another and seeing our shared experiences as Akan youth, whether it's our names, whether it's what our parents told us to eat, whatever it may be. And so everyone has a different reflection on what that'll be. So Yao, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Afia. When I was presented with the topic that we came up with, which was practicing Akan culture as an African living in America, one quote came to mind, and that was a quote by none other than Nana Yao Operi Dinizulu I, our founder. And that quote is, "Out of your culture comes everything. From it comes your politics, how you eat, the clothes you wear, how you reproduce and live with your family, every facet of life." And so I chose this quote because as Africans living in America, if we were to truly embrace and live our culture 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a lot of the problems that we are faced with in this country would go away in some cases, in most cases, actually. When we were speaking on this topic, a lot of my peers explained that they find it difficult to exist as an African American, but also embracing this Akan culture at the same time, and that they often see it as two worlds that we exist in, that we must coexist in. That came as a shock to me. I never really saw it as two worlds. I really saw it as one world, my world, the culture I live, and the society having to adapt to who I am. When I explained this, I was asked to also provide examples as to how I came up with that and how I deal with it on a regular basis. One example that came to mind was In 2017, in March of 2017, I was offered a job and opportunity at the Bronx EOC, which is the Educational Opportunity Center. This was the pay was, I believe, $32,000 a year, which isn't much money, but it was definitely a huge increase from what I was currently making. I accepted the interview, and I heard through the grapevine, because I knew a lot of people that worked at the office, that I was to show up in a suit and tie for the interview. Now, this was passed down to me, not from the director, but through the grapevine. And so the first thing I did was I went directly to my elders, which is what my culture suggests that I do. I take a problem like that to my elders. I spoke with them about it, and they explained that that is not your culture. You absolutely do not have to show up in a suit and tie. You can show up in what you traditionally wear. Your clothing is professional, and it shows who you are, and it's enough to do the interview in. So I battled with it for a very short time. Needless to say, I did show up in an African suit. I did the interview, and I crushed the interview. It went very well. The panel, they really liked my attire. However, I did not secure the position. And it was made clear to me via email that it did have to do with my attire, that I didn't even have to wear a suit and tie per se. Even just a shirt and tie would have been enough. But because of my attire, I was denied the position. That was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, because it forced me to dive into my own entrepreneurial goals a lot harder. It showed me that if I can't exist in an employment in this country without having to fold or bend my cultural morals to fit into what they want me to be in order to make a certain amount of money, then I don't need to work there. And so this is an example of me truly embracing my culture wherever I am, for no matter if there's money on the line, my life on the line, etc. I will never fold and be what this society wants me to be. I will stand true to my culture, as the quote is saying. Out of that comes everything. And still, through my culture, I've been able to develop my business to a point where I don't need a job at this point. I don't have to take any more interviews as I did before. And so that is the example that I was at. This is an example that I was asked to give, and that was the best one that I could come up with. So I would say, out of our culture does come everything. Stand true to it, don't fold, and exhibit it. And you're gonna have to sacrifice. You're gonna have to be willing to give up money. You're gonna have to be willing to give up positions, homes, if you truly want to exist in one world, not two worlds, but in one world. That's where everything lies. So it comes with sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
Yes. Thank you, Yao. I think that Yao's statement, it really shows a testament to self-identity. And we represent the third generation of Akans in America. And we understand that the choice to identify as an Akan in America was a choice itself. It was a form of protest during the time in which all of our elders decided to relinquish their birth names and their identities that were tied to Christianity and tied to some of the different constructs of this society. And so we appreciate that, and we understand that you all have willingly made the choice to protest and to stand for something and to identify yourself as Africans in America, and Pan-Africans, as opposed to just the descendants of slaves. You understood that your culture and your history was much more rich than that. My slide, or my example, is taking it a little bit step further. So I understand For me, I think that the best form of protest, one of the best forms of protest is gaining an economic interdependence within our culture. I'm sure that many people are aware of like the Susu game that has been going on around since COVID started, and we are all familiar with Susus. We are all familiar with exchanging money within our own community. Just to read the quote that I have on, it's not a quote, I guess it's of my own creation, but the most effective protest we can do is to build ourselves economically, establishing a financial interdependence within our community in order to generate wealth for our following generations, owning land, property, businesses, etc., things that can be passed down. I feel like a large reason why, we know the systemic racism that we experience is not just prejudice. It's not just people calling us the N-word or the violence of it. It's the opportunities that we've been limited, that you all have been limited and that we've been limited. So I feel like one of the best ways in which we could protest, if we are talking about protest, I think one of the best ways we could protest is to establish a way out of continuously supporting this system that doesn't respect us, honestly. I've had the pleasure of being able to travel for the past few months, and I think that there's a lot that I didn't know about land ownership, about home ownership, about business, about wealth, about generational wealth that I've learned in the past few months, more than I've learned over a large portion of my life, just based off of what I had my attention on. And I see that to really be the best way, if not other ways, for us to really protest and to stop being victimized by the system, is to stop feeding the system. And I understand that it's not easy. I understand that we all have 9-to-5s and we all need pensions and we all need to work to some degree. But I think that there should be a focus on trying to build our wealth together. For me, for example, is for those who are unaware, say we've been looking for a building. We know that we've had the building on Sufton Boulevard. That was the last building that I know of. We have had access to different buildings. We've rented different buildings, but I'm sorry, one second. About your mommy. I apologize. So I think that
It's okay. He's showing respect to his elders. He's listening to what his mama's saying.
yeah, I'm sorry, my mother just came in and I didn't want her to disturb. But for example, for those who are not aware, equity is built through ownership. So a lot of ways in which we build equity in America is by owning houses. A lot of people, Caucasians who lived in suburbs, were able to have houses that were passed down to them. So they started with a line of equity. My generation, they started with a line of equity before they were even born, and it's been a struggle for us and the Black community. And we know all of the systematic obstacles that have been put in place for that purposely so that we cannot develop equity. And it seems as if still we continue to play into that game. I know that it takes extra effort, but anything that we can do, starting a business. I love the fact that Abu is a butcher, because now I don't buy any meat from the grocery store. I never trusted the meat at the grocery store anyway. So now I feel that much more confident knowing that my dollars, my money for the food in which I'm eating is supporting my brother. If we had more carpenters, if we had more plumbers, if we had more electricians, if we had more people that deal with agriculture, farmers, that deal with agriculture, if we build these systems, whether they start off small or not, so that we can learn to change money within each other and change services within each other, I think that our longevity is going to be a lot greater, and I think that that would be the ultimate form of protest. I understand going out and marching and, you know, fighting for the cause, but I'm not begging nobody for my life. They didn't give me my life, so I don't beg nobody for my life. You know, so that's my opinion, and I think that building an equity and learning how to really interchange funds within each other would be a ultimate form of protest in America. The second thing deals with personal healing, emotional healing, spiritual healing. Healing of emotional trauma on a personal and collective level. We cannot love each other if we do not love ourselves. We cannot trust each other if we do not trust ourselves. How do spiritual practices heal our unseen wounds to better serve our collective self? We understand that we are all suffering from PTSD, and that's post-traumatic slave disorder. Even white people suffer from it too, but on the other side, but we're not talking about them. I feel that our spiritual practice and our emotional well-being needs to, we all need to heal. You know, trauma comes every day. We are surrounded and brainwashed by trauma. If you didn't see somebody get shot in your face, don't worry, it'll be on the news, it'll be on your timeline, it'll be on your news feed. I probably seen 100 people die in the last year on my phone. They're fast tracking trauma to us. They're fast tracking it so that we can always live in fear, and they're training our brains, you know. And I think that we need to know what type of exercises or practices that we can do to counteract some of those negative influences. Alone, the trauma itself, the violence itself, but you know, a cup of water, it doesn't matter how clean the water is if the cup itself is cracked. You know, it doesn't matter what it is that we are holding if we are not able to utilize it, if we don't have the proper tools to utilize it. So if I'm not healthy, whether I hold the traditions of my ancestors, and those traditions are the things that are intended to strengthen my cup, you know, and it's intended to strengthen all of our cups. But if we do not also do some of the different exercises to heal ourselves emotionally and heal ourselves mentally from the trauma that they're fast tracking to us, I don't think that I think that we will just continue to be a product in their game, whether or not we identify as Akan, whether we identify as Caribbean, whether we identify, because we all come from different cultures of the diaspora. But that trauma has been experienced everywhere, whether you're Haitian American, whether you're Jamaican American, Bayesian American, you are experiencing and you are taught that you are the child of a slave, and that trauma is continuously reinforced every day. So I think that healing ourselves truly emotionally on an individual level and on a collective level is also another excellent way, or a first start to kind of mitigating some of the problems of America, and just to reinforce our own strength. And I think that the culture reinforces it. I think that over the years, it's probably been watered down a little bit. And I say that only because it was a choice for our elders. You know, we were born into this, so we never knew anything else. It wasn't a form of protest for us. It was just, this is what it is. I go to school, I wear African clothes. It just is what it is. But we didn't learn, I could speak for myself, some of us didn't learn some of the tools to kind of counteract that trauma that we still face on a daily basis going through this world, living in white America. So those are just some of the examples in which I feel that we can protest some of the pain, the anguish, the trauma, the constant, you know, victimization of our people. And, you know, we're going to get through it. I believe in us. So that ain't no issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perry, I agree with everything that you said 100%. And I am really thankful when we've all had our conversations, how we decided to speak about healing specifically. I am one of those people who feels that there are two worlds. And a lot of our conversation, we all talked about how do we create them to be one world. And I found that from the last conversation that I had with some friends that who are Black people or African American people, that there has always been a discrepancy within the term Black or African American. Even in my personal experience, if I met someone who was born and raised in Ghana and I tell them that, oh, I'm Akom, they're like, oh, you're born there. And then all of a sudden I'm not African anymore because I wasn't born and raised within Ghana as a whole. So I had a conversation last year with Intia, and we discussed the term Black African American. So from there, I started to do some research and just kind of see where people are feeling and just what the world is as a whole right now, as Black people, as African American people, whatever we choose. So I feel like one of the biggest forms of protest for me is living in my authenticity of my skin color, of my diaspora, of my culture, and being able to walk, but I also walk with the knowledge that I go to school with majority white people. My career choice is a white-run, whitewashed industry. So for me, two worlds is code switching, is how I'm speaking with you all right now. I might not be as comfortable walking into that same room for fear of like how Yao was like, I didn't get the job because I decided to do this. But for me, when I do things like that, it's a gamble essentially. So I am really curious throughout this process. And some questions that I want everyone to keep in mind is if you do feel that there is one world, how do you operate in that? And throughout your years of operating, how did you feel that works for you? So in my research, I found this amazing article, and they quoted, "Those who are descendants of slaves were referred to as African American. The percentage of those Black folks are going down. More Black people are here from other parts of the diaspora and parts of the continent. We have a lot of East Africans, West Africans, and Caribbean Blacks in the United States. When I address you as Black or African American, they both apply, but it may be the situation where some Black folks whose parents come from other parts of the world may not identify as African American. It is better to be called Black Americans." So for me, for example, my mother is Jamaican. My father, everybody knows, he's just from Queens. So I've often been like, for me, I will say that I'm a Black woman, but you get that little box in the form. So I'm like, all right, well, then I can put African American, or really what is the difference, and pretty much why does it matter? But at the same time, it puts it into perspective for me in a way where when I walk into a room, people are going to see me as one. So the way that I can combat that and protest that is by authentically walking in that and diminishing the stereotypes. And I feel like the culture for me has been able, for me to be able to diminish a lot of stereotypes in terms of where I plan on going in this world. So I feel like we are the people that have been given this opportunity for spiritual enlightenment throughout the culture. So when we walk in a world with skin color that's powerful from descendants and we honor them, I often wonder, how do we go about it in a way where we're able to honor both? When we say that we come from royalty, we came from these African descendants, these powerful, powerful people, but do we neglect our ancestors that were also slaves? And one thing that I found is that in those two worlds, having to pick by using the term Black or African American, because there's not an essential term that identifies both. Can I be descendants from slaves in America, but also be descendants from royalty that came from Ghana, from Africa, from any part of the continent as a whole? My answer is yes. But in talking to friends who don't have the same spiritual connection that I have, being involved in the Akom culture, there's a disconnect for them in the way that they walk in the world. So one of the things that I would love to happen, and we've all decided, we've discussed this, is that bringing those people in and allowing them to also experience the culture as a whole. One of the things that myself and Deja and everyone also talked about was the difference between being African American and African as a whole. So Deja, I know we had that conversation that there's a difference with us and people who have been growing up in the culture didn't have a choice. Even our names, I'll use my dad, for example. His name was originally Elijah, and he went and chose to change his name to Kwesi. That was for him, a way for him to walk in his self-identity and him to communicate in the culture. But for myself, my name is Adjua, and I didn't necessarily have that choice growing up for me to be like, oh, no, I don't want you to call me that, call me this. And everyone calls me Asha, but there's still, it's not the typical name. So I'm growing up with having to do that much and live authentically. It was like a force. There was no real leeway. And it's something that a lot of us are struggling with in terms of where we all fit within this world and how we continue to walk confidently. So I would love for everyone, when we have our Q&A, to think about how you operate in both spaces, and if you feel that there is two worlds and if there's not. Opari, you said to me, how is the sonnet shown in multi-religious households? That's another conversation that we had. For a lot of us, we have family members who are parents. One might walk in the Akom faith and others might walk in the Christian or Baptist faith. So there's a lot of worldly separations here that for us as the youth, it's as if we come stuck and we have to choose, essentially. So I guess the question is really, again, how do we work on mending that one? Thank you. Great. Okay, I think this is Afia.
Yeah, this is me. So I was really interested in Yao's quote that he chose to present on. And so I asked myself, if out of our culture comes everything, then where does our activism live? Because included in that quote was, out of our culture comes our politics, comes the way we eat, comes the way we raise our families, and so on. And if you know me, you know that I am deeply embedded in the political world, no matter how much I may dislike it. And so I thought this was a timely presentation because reconciling these different terms of Black, African, African-American is a conversation that I've been having my entire college career. And I have made it a point to make it very clear that I walk as a descendant of slaves who practices the Akan religion. And I think what's in some ways the core of our culture in America is that we are Americans and that we did choose this and chose to expand it in a way that worked for us. And so today, while I was raised in a Pan-African community, like while I went to Nation House, which is very pro-Black, very Pan-African, has its own issues. But in that community, we used African, Black, African-American interchangeably. But today, I very much make it a pointed decision to call myself a Black American. My roots, my mom is from rural Georgia, and my dad's roots are all throughout the South. And so I think as I developed as a young woman, particularly through these last 4 years of college, it was important for me to put that at the forefront of my identity. And I think as we talk about religion, as we get older and as we expand into the world, our religion, in some ways, you don't want it to be the first thing that people see when they look at you, right? Like my name is Afia, and so people would always ask me where I was really from, right? Well, I'm not really from Ghana, right? But my culture is Ghana. And so I wanted to make that distinction very clear. And so it's important to me to recognize the uniqueness of what it means to exist both today in our Africanness and our Americanness, because the issues that we face as Americans, because we live here, are truly unique. And very, very different from what is faced on the continent. And the issues of what people face on the continent are different depending on what country they're in. And I think personally it's very important that we become more open about these conversations, because while I grew up in a Pan-African community, I often see the Pan-African community and the Akan community as separate. And so the education that I got from the Pan-African community, while people who were in the Akan culture and the Akan faith were there, it was a separate entity. And so I would love to see us as a culture embody more of Pan-African ideals, or to just embody more activism, to take more action in our day-to-day lives, because the issues that we face as Black Americans do not go away when we enter our bubble. And so issues like gun control, issues like mass incarceration rates, those affect us. But I personally have not seen us talk about it. And so in the past few months, I started a nonprofit called Hand in Hand DC, which works to support protesters on the ground. But the true mission is really to meet the movement for Black lives from wherever we are, right? Like some people's activism looks like donating money. Some people's activism looks like marching in the streets. And I think as a community, we get to decide what our activism looks like. But I don't think it's ever excusable for our activism to just be quiet and for us not to be coming together actively to be having these discussions. And so what we did with my nonprofit was to create these, what we call protest packs, to give essential PPE supplies and snacks, water, Gatorade, all that good stuff, first aid, to, I think we got it to like 3,000 packs out. And we split our materials between protesters and organizations supporting homelessness in the district, in DC. Because the movement for Black Lives looks very different in very different places, right? We have to meet people at homeless shelters because a lot of the attack on Black lives is in housing. And so I would love for us to be more open about these discussions and be more open to incorporating our values into what activism looks like. Like we're still a very young organization and we still don't know what is going to come next, but I think we do have to push ourselves and challenge ourselves to expand.
This slide for us actually was a very interesting topic of conversation. And I want to just say that when we talk about community, I feel like we have to be inclusive to every part of that community. And in my experience within the Black community, Akom culture, African American, whatever name that you choose, is that there's a lot of pushback on the LGBTQIA community. And in our discussion, we discussed the future of the Akom culture. And a lot of it is the youth. And I think one thing that we don't talk about openly enough is the spectrum of sexuality. And in our conversations, a lot of youth, for example, don't want to come back or don't want to participate because they feel shunned, because they don't feel welcomed. So I want to say, when we're going forward and when we're deciding to be open and we call ourselves a community, we have to look at what community really means and how we choose to define that, because you can't say we're a community and then shun me because now I like women, or because now I say I don't like, or now I'm non-binary, or now I want to tell you which pronoun I'd like for you to use, and now you're looking at me sideways. And I think we have to walk with community and walk with it as a whole, because we, like Afia said, we don't get to just live in our little bubble. And that's often what it feels like. We come, we home, we talk, we eat, we do our shrine work, blah, 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 we go home. But now I'm going home and now I'm walking in a room with all these white kids, if we're being honest, or seriously. So when we're talking about community, we have to be specific in our intention. And community has to mean our other Black brothers and sisters that are behind us. It cannot just mean us by ourselves, because we are not by ourselves. We all have people, cousins, families, whatever. So we have to be universal to them. We have to be a community for them fully. So Afia, you want me to read this part of the slide, or do you want to read it?
Go for it.
Great. Blackness and the LGBTQ plus community. Oftentimes in conversations around activism and communal changes, we are not inclusive of all peoples. Let's protect all of our children and allow visibility in every part of us. Freedom is not just for cisgendered heterosexual men. I'm gonna say that one again. Freedom is not just for cisgendered heterosexual men.
And if you're not familiar with that term, cisgender, it just means that you identify with the gender with which you were born.
Yes.
You're the sex with which you were born.
Yeah. While we often think this perspective is not our own, we have to take a hard look at our day-to-day actions and how children internalize the messages that we give them. And I'm going to stress that part again. It's important for us as a community, and this community specifically, because we're so tight. A lot of us know each other. A lot of us have seen other people have children and raised, and it's very much a community to an extent. So we have to think about our actions. We have to think about what we're saying. We have to think about how that affects future generations. We have to think about how, if I'm a person that's walking in the Akom culture and I know somebody else who maybe doesn't, but is thinking about a spiritual practice, and I am not sure about the LGBTQA community and how that it fits and involved, now we don't have someone, now we've just lost someone who was looking for something, who was looking for spirituality, who was looking for connection. So I think I would love for everyone to take from this to just re-look at how you feel about the LGBTQIA community and why. And if we're gonna walk in an atmosphere where we stress community, then we need to really, really truthfully, wholeheartedly be communal to all people, all Black people.
And I think as we have this conversation, it means we have to take a hard look at some of our traditions. It means we have to look at things like day names, right? Day names are very gendered. You're a female or you're a male, and you get a name based on it. But what happens when you have a child that doesn't identify with one of those categories? And it doesn't mean that these things are inherently wrong. It just means that we need to have a conversation, a broader understanding of what it means moving forward as we have a more expanded understanding of the world.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Now we will be open for our Q&A session if anyone has any questions.
I do not see any questions listed in the chat, but I do have a question based upon that last slide, the LGBTQIA.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching the expressions of the young men, and I wanted to hear what their opinions are, because just seeing them, it's like they're squirming. So
Yeah.
just based upon that, I just want to hear how they feel in reference to that slide for the LGBTQIA community.
I would love to hear as well.
Okay.
Again,
Let's start with Apari.
Here.
Yeah. So this last slide, right? And I know this is a very sensitive topic, and we didn't
Go back
get
to that last slide, please. When you
we didn't get to speak as in-depthly about it before presenting, but we definitely agreed that it should be a part of the presentation within the culture who have identified different sexuality, maybe not gender-wise, but maybe their sexual preference is different. And me personally, I feel like it is a conversation that needs to be had. My belief in terms of traditions, I do believe in gender roles, and I do believe in freedom of choice. I think that there is, I don't feel like anybody out in our community should be ostracized, or anybody in our community should feel uncomfortable coming around because of their sexual preference choice. I do understand that our traditions come from ancient time, you know, and they've been passed down. And like all culture is something that's flexible and something that's fluid. And I feel like we shouldn't put people kind of in a box, or I think that there's a lot of people that just would not feel welcome in the space. And I think that no matter what, that we should work on making a safe space for our family, you know. And I would hate to have any of my family members or any person that I care about that I know that would feel ostracized or would feel uncomfortable coming around because of their sexual preference, because that's not the way in which I judge them. That's not the way in which I define them. That's their own private business, me personally. So if you want to be however you perceive yourself, then that's how you perceive yourself. I do think that I do personally feel that there are specific, it's interesting, something that's coming to my mind. When I went to Iowa, there's a young gentleman that I met he identified as feminine, you know, and he said that he is a divine feminine energy within this physical body. And it kind of brings out the question of spirit a little bit more, because if we think about it, you got male spirits, female spirits, possessing males, possessing females. This person is marrying this spirit. This person is marrying this spirit. So it's a little bit fluid in spirituality, but it's not fluid in human physical, in our physical interactions. I feel like the traditions kind of, or the traditions are supposed to, rather I say, And I say that because they've been passed down and they came from across the seas, and even Africans and we all have a certain amount of conditioning that we have to break through. But I think the most important thing is definitely creating a safe space for us. I do value feminine energy. I do value masculine energy. I do feel like they have their roles, but I do think that people have to understand that we have both of those energies within us. And I think that the traditions are supposed to enlighten or enliven that. And if they don't do that, then we are going to be subject to the conditioning of society, whether that be good, bad, right, wrong. That's not my decision. But I know that once I see you in my face, if you my family, I'm not going to shun you, or I'm not going to look at you different for whatever choice that you've made and how you express your sexuality, how you express your being, how you express yourself. So that's my personal opinion.
Thank you for that. Yao, did you have anything to add?
Respectfully, I do not. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I do have a question from Sewa. She's asking, why can't you just say I am of African descent? All other cultures don't try to explain. I am Italian or I am Puerto Rican, but I was born here. Anyone want to answer that?
Sure, I'll jump in. I actually love that question. And she's right. They don't, for the most part, no one's really going around looking to claim America. Even Malcolm X once said, after he said several things, I am not an American, you are not an American. In fact, if we were American, the issues that we're faced with today wouldn't even exist. So I actually don't even use the word American at all. I have a lot of friends that argue with me saying, oh, you were born here, you're American. Stop trying to not be American and all this stuff. But we just argue back and forth, but I do not claim American at all. I say that I'm African living in America, and that is all. But I do not claim to be American at all.
Same. And for me, when I think about the term American, I think about my ancestors who are here, who are slaves, who built this country. So for me, I often think about, if I don't say American necessarily, am I not paying homage to my Black African family, heritage, blood, roots, homage to them who have worked to build this country so I can get here? Because I can understand, and I do understand, that my descendants were originally in Africa doing their thing, and something happened, and now they're here. They were here, they died, they were beaten, they were enslaved. So yes, I can say of African descent, but I think and I don't want to say struggle per se, but my qualm or my question is often, how do I pay homage to both? And I can know that, but I don't think it's enough for me to just know, like, if I know, how do I express that confidently and in a way where other Black Americans, other African Americans understand that roots and also create a community that way.
Afia, did you have something else to add?
Yes, I think I wholeheartedly claim my Americanness. I don't like this country. I don't like the way we live. I don't like anything that has happened to us throughout our history. But at the end of the day, my Americanness is truly unique. And I think if people are allowed to say, like, I am Jamaican American, I'm Puerto Rican American, I get to say I'm American American, right? Like, I'm here. Like, my parents don't have no ties elsewhere. But it's clear from the color of my skin that my descendancy is from the continent of Africa, right? You don't have to inquire further, right? But my experience as a young woman today is shaped by me being a descendant of slaves in this country, and not by the fact that, like, my parents might have been raised in another country and brought those cultures here, right? Like, I think those are two very unique experiences. And for some people, it works to say I'm an African descendant. And it just depends. But I think for me, in the place where I am, in my politics, and in how I have reconcile all the different cultures that have come to create me, I think this is what works for me.
Okay, I have one more question from Nana Kwesi Ajaman. He says, why must it be either or?
Can I speak?
Before you go on, Nana, let one of the young people answer that question first.
I thought I would elaborate on the question.
Go ahead, Nana.
Thank you. We sometimes forget that our heritage is a continuum. It doesn't, I'm in August, I got here from May, but May got here from February. So the slavery is not a starting point for how we view ourselves. The slaves were Africans too. So it's not that if we look at slavery, we're looking at Americans, and if we look at people who are still in Africa, we're looking at Africans. It's all a continuum. All we're doing is reclaiming something that was taken from those slaves, an identity that they were stripped of. So it should be less of a factor of how you name yourself, because calling yourself African doesn't reflect anything other than the fact that you have a cultural identity. Italians have a cultural identity. Irish have a cultural identity. English have a cultural identity. Spaniards, everybody who comes here from another country brings their cultural identity with them. We're unique in that our cultural identity was stripped from us in order to oppress us. Our effort is to reclaim that, to study it, to learn it, to know it, to embrace it, to adopt it, and to pass it on to future generations so that they won't suffer that weakness and victimization. So African American and Black American, Black means nothing. It's a color, it's a designation. It's another word for Negro, it's another word for colored. It's a way of saying this person has no cultural identity. African at least begins to establish a cultural identity for whom that person is. The dress, the names, the language, the food you eat, all of those other things are extensions of that cultural identity. But until you get to the point where you're saying, I'm claiming that for myself and for my family and for my progeny, then you're going to continue to define yourself or be defined by somebody else who's trying to oppress you. So when we say it's got to be this or it's got to be that, or I see myself as this or I see myself as that, it's a collective. We're not just the one thing. It's a continuum, and we're both of those things, all of those things at once. I guess I answered it and didn't just elaborate the question.
You did it great. But based upon everything that you said, Nana, a lot of the people are commenting on what you said. They're saying it's very, very true. It's excellent. It's accurate. And something else that I believe Kofi Anum had said that I wanted to point out to the presenters, one of the things that I kept hearing you all say were that the slaves, we were enslaved Africans. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out, and that's what Kofi Anum had mentioned as well. Our descendants were enslaved. They were not slaves. So with that being said, that 15 minutes is good for answer and questions. Anybody else? Are you continuing on with your presentation?
Yeah, we're going to continue, but I just want to say one thing. That I agree, but one thing that I didn't hear you say was that within our enslaved, and I'm going to correct myself, thank you for that, in our enslaved, the Africans that were enslaved, that they then adapted and created a new culture that lived in America and is now bred. So my question again is, how are we paying homage to that as well? Because all I heard was, we're thinking about our African ancestors that came from Africa that were then enslaved. But those enslaved Africans then created a culture and created something for Black Americans or people in America. So the culture has adapted and evolved in a way where we have to pay homage to both.
Well, I think that's what Nana was saying, is when he said it's a continuum.
That's what I'm saying, but like how I didn't hear in his response the acknowledgement to that as well. I agree with everything, majority of everything that he said, but it's still that missing piece for me personally.
And I don't think it should be missing. I hear what you're saying. I think that they didn't create a new culture. They transformed the culture that they had. The culture had been impacted by interaction with Europeans. If you look at Africa's, Ghana in particular's history, and you look at the interaction that happened in Accra and Cape Coast with the interaction with the Dutch and then the British, and how that impacted those cultures, and then you go further to the north and you see the Ashanti, and you go to the Dagbani, who had very little interaction with the Europeans at all, you see that the culture becomes unchanged, unfiltered, undiluted, more concentrated. So we've gone through that too, because and if you look in the Caribbean, people who come from the Caribbean, they lived in majority African-centric islands with very few white people in the population, all right? The colonial process was to govern from abroad. In America, we have a majority white population, and that's impacted how our culture has evolved. I would never try to diminish the impact and the importance, particularly of spiritualism on our survival and growth and development, and on the fact that Africans in America during the time from the 1400s through to the present day have always been Africans. They've always been that. So we're not diminishing what we've gone through. We're claiming what we've gone through. In fact, we're standing on their shoulders by doing the things that we're trying to do now. We're not standing on the shoulders of Africans who didn't come over here. We're learning from some of the things that were taken from us, but we're standing by doing this, and it's not new. We're standing on the shoulders of Africans who were in America, Africans who were in America, not American. The blacks in America, it wasn't black Americans who were enslaved. It was Africans who were enslaved. And they didn't become African Americans, they just were enslaved Africans. So if you want to pay homage to them, what I always say is do the thing that they would have loved to do themselves, is go home. Do the thing that they would live their whole lives wishing that they could do, that their children could do, that their grandchildren could do, was go and get the thing that was taken from them, because they can't do it now. They're dead. They're physically dead. But they're speaking to us all the time in the way that of the foods that we eat in the South, the foods that are prepared in the Caribbean, the music of the rhythms that we have, the culture. There's so much in our culture that is common, that until we learn it and begin to recognize it. I mean, Nana Dinizulu was always good for that, for pointing out the similarities in African American culture and cuisine and mannerisms, and you can see the same thing, and the same thing you find when we go to Africa. You can stand in Accra and you can see people, you'll feel like you're in the Bronx. So it's not a distinction. It's just that we're not familiar with it. And we're in a position where we can become familiar with it. I go to Ghana a lot because I started from the position that my ancestors would have given anything to be able to go home. I can hop on a plane and go there. And I first went for them, not for me. And any African American who doesn't at least recognize, you want to pay homage to those people who suffered and struggled and lived under the whip and died early and were worked to death in chains or bondage and oppression, to pay homage to them is to get back the thing that was taken from them. To me, that's how I see it. But it never is a question of either or. It's never the Africans who were in America or the Africans who were in Africa, because it was just one group. It's just a continuum. And then if you go even further and you look at how the Europeans instituted colonialism in West Africa in particular, it's almost the same exact strategies as what they used here. It was different because they had a majority African population to deal with, but they caused the division. The people had European names. They used religion to come in and separate generations. Everything that you see that happened here happened there too, to a different degree. And the wisdom and the intelligence and the brilliance of people there in terms of overcoming it and fighting for independence, and it's astounding to see what they were able to do. So, I mean, we're blessed 1,000-fold. We're blessed 1,000-fold. But part of that blessing is the ability to go back and get the treasure that was taken from us. So
thank you, Nana.
I'm too through. Love you. I love you.
Also gonna say thank you, and I think
Thank
you and I should continue this conversation.
Anytime. You know I like to talk, so that's not an issue.
Yes, Nana. All right, let's continue on with the presentation.
If I may ask, I'd like to say,
I just wanted to add something in closing, just that I wholeheartedly agree with you, Nana, but I also respectfully disagree with this belief that Black means nothing. Because I think that once we came to America and became like we were enslaved in this country, I think we built this country, right? And to say that we didn't build this America, didn't build the foundations of this America, is to disrespect those who came before us. And so I think when I use Black is to say that when we got to this country, we did not speak the same language, right? We all came from different places and were forced into tight quarters. We all were stripped of our language. We were stripped of our families and so on and so forth. In some way, through all of that, we built a culture that has influenced the entire world, right? And that culture is built out of that struggle that we faced as enslaved Africans and enslaved Africans in America. And therefore, America has expanded this Black Americanness, hip hop, everything. It has African roots, yes. And I don't think saying Black ignores those roots in any way, shape, or form. It's just to say that somehow we came together in this particular place to build 400 years of something that has changed the entire world. And I think personally, I want to make sure we claim that actively. And I don't think that disregards the notion that our ancestors wanted to go home and they wanted to be there. But guess what? Going home, Ghana isn't necessarily where home may be. We got to go everywhere. And we got to pick pieces of what is important. Like we got to take little pieces of all of these cultures and try and learn. But at the end of the day, where my ancestors were and the ground that they worked and lived and died and bled on is right here. And so going back to Africa is not going to solve the problems that I may be trying to reconcile in my day-to-day life.
If I may add, I so wholeheartedly completely agree with you, Nana. I think that going back to the original conversation, that I think we should kind of move away from trying to find a word that defines me versus saying I define that word. You know, we said, oh, does African American define me? Does Black American define me? Why can't I define African American? I am a descendant of enslaved Africans living in this new world. The new world, before it was even America, was the new world and things of that nature. So I think instead of trying to find a word that matches me, I'm defining this word that people choose to match for me. I'm defining it, I'm representing it with this conversation, with the LGBTQ conversation. Yes, my name is Yao because I'm a male and I was born this day, but I represent more than just that. I represent my feminismness, my masculinity, whatever it is. You need to represent that word instead of letting that word represent you and define you. But I just wanted to add.
Okay, we're gonna continue on with the presentation.
Great. Okay, visions for the future. Let's move on. But we should revisit this 100%. Visions for the future. All right, Deja, take it away.
I'm so thrilled to introduce our second and last segment of our presentation, which is our vision for the culture and the future. And so with that, I'm going to describe it with 3 adjectives. And those 3 adjectives are accessibility, attractiveness, and all-inclusiveness. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we don't use all 3 of these adjectives, or we're not using it to the best of our abilities, but I think we should hone in on these 3 adjectives and utilize them a bit more. So starting with the first adjective, accessibility. I think the Akom culture must be easily accessible to all. When I say all, I mean members of our current Akom culture and prospective members, because we're of course trying to grow and prosper and enlighten others with the importance of the Akom culture by means of virtual interactions and in-person interactions. So we have been grateful to partake in virtual interactions due to an unfortunate circumstance, which is COVID-19. But I feel once we pass this event and we figure out a vaccine or whatever it may be and we're able to meet face to face, our virtual interaction should not come to a cease, come to an end. We need to continue with both because as we're seeing, there are several youth or several adults, just anyone in the culture that is not necessarily in close proximity to everyone else in DC or in New York City or wherever it may be. So the virtual world allows all of us to come together. And so I think by doing that, we should enhance and start doing monthly or bi-weekly, but because I'm a youth, I like to say twice a month, having sessions twice a month or once a month for youth to come together and allow that establishment of us to kind of learn and practice the ways of being in a con. It is necessary for youth to interact with people like them that can relate to them, someone that is their age, similar to them, goes through the same things that they're going through every day. Like, oh my gosh, my teacher can't say my name right. It's taken them 50 tries. Just someone that can relate to them on that relatable circumstance and things of that nature. And I believe by doing that, having meetings with the youth is truly essential to getting to that, which will also allow for an environment for us to open up and have that safe and respectful questioning and conversation. What does it mean to have my name? Or why do we have a combs? Like, what is the whole purpose of it? What is a deity? What does a deity mean? And so having a youth session and forum allows for youth to ask those questions that they may be scared to ask when they're watching and learning from their elderlies and peers around them. And then so from there, I believe it's extremely important to have a point of contact to further our next point, which is attractiveness. Now, when I say attractiveness, I say it to kind of continue on with the 3 A's of my adjectives, but really to say engagement. We really need to increase our engagement as Akans in the Akan cultures. So by having our first youth session, we should have a point of contact for all the youth to go to when they're coming with conflicts or just questioning for anything. And even, okay, so I'm a youth and I'm realizing that I like dance. I want to be a dancer. I want to be more involved with Akan dance and culture. Who do I talk to? So you go to your contact within the youth group and they'll connect you with someone that loves dance and has several more resources for that youth that's involved in dance. Or whether you're a food enthusiast, you want to learn how to make more Akan foods at home, more fish dishes, more rice dishes, whatever the dish may be. And so you're looking for that point of contact of people that are into cooking and spices and resources for that. And then from there, that will continue with having that open dialogue and connections and building upon the relationships that we already have. Again, and so that allows that youth to really hone into that interest or subject that they really have. And again, when I say attractiveness, I mean engagement. We must draw attentions to the foundations of the cultures all the time on a regular basis. So I think it's important to draw attention to the foundations of Akan culture and the purpose of the way of life that we're going through, and doing that in a creative way, which again, it goes all the way back to having that youth session to do that in a creative way that attracts them to understand and really have a fine line of the foundation of Akan culture, and to also provide them with resources to kind of make their own elevator pitch in a sense. So when I go across my front, I can really tell them what Akan culture is, why I'm wearing this attire, why I speak this way, or why I think this way, because I know what Akan culture truly is, whether I'm someone that comes to one meeting, whether I'm someone that comes to all the meetings, or someone that's here, that comes here and there. And so I think it's really important, again, like I said, to highlight the true foundations and importance to Akan cultures, regardless if you're a dedicated person to the culture or not as dedicated to someone that's truly excited and passionate about it. And then so once we figure that out, I think it's truly important to be all-inclusive with the Akan culture. And when I say all-inclusive, I'm not saying we aren't doing that already, but to really bring that to its fullest potential and find out the purpose to why our members are a part of the Akan culture. Are they really there because of the spiritual needs, or are they there for the social needs? And once we figure that out, we can really tailor to our members on what sessions they should be a part of, how they can be involved, and how they can be engaged, because it's really important, again, to highlight the essential needs of all of our members. And I think an easy way and fun way to do that is start off with social activities, like how we're doing right now, virtual interactions. We can do virtual community service. We can do girls trips similar to the camps that the boys already have. Themed Zoom sessions. And I also want to point out that there's a difference between Zoom sessions and Zoom workshops. Sessions are more socializing and fun activities like painting and listening to music, while a workshop is, of course, socializing, but also educating, with the main purpose of educating others about mental health or whatever the subject may be. And fashion shows or talent shows. And really, I think the best way to do this is by sending out a survey and figuring out what everyone's interests are and hobbies are, so we can have those sessions or workshops that highlights everybody's interest in concerns. So again, I really do appreciate you all listening to me. Some of the things I've said you'll hear again throughout the rest of our presenters, and I can't wait to hear your feedback. I'd like to hand it over to Yao.
Hello again, Yao here speaking. My slide is yet again another quote from our founder, Nana Yawa Parry Denizulu the First. When I was asked to create a slide about the visions for the future and what I envision for the future of our community, another quote came to mind. It says, "Our own people do not understand the concept of sticking together and pooling resources to try and build something. In order to build, we need money and resources. We hope that our children will be the generation who will understand the importance of owning land and property." Now, when I chose this quote, a lot of what I envision for our future and the things that I am working to be involved in are just that: pooling resources together, purchasing land, purchasing property. But when we discussed this, I was asked yet again for examples of how this is going to be possible. And so another example came to mind. And one of the things that will make this possible is to encourage entrepreneurship. I am an entrepreneur myself, and I guess the main example that I'll use is my godfather, Uncle Kese Amoa, who is the spearhead of this entire project. Now, Uncle Kese, as we all know, has a PhD. However, the endeavor that I see him involved in the most, and that I see a lot of success in, and that he's been able to truly help our communities with, is his recycling center on Murdoch Avenue. Every time I see him, when I drop off bottles that we collect at Onipa, he's always saying, you know, business is good. He doesn't have any complaints. The COVID-19 pandemic allowed his business to boom even more. And so it's very inspiring for me to see that. Now, Uncle Kese, with his business, was able to create several fundraisers in order to purchase buildings, in order to purchase land, in order to purchase the things that we truly need to exist as a strong and resourceful community. Now, this was possible through his business. Now, I'll go back again. Yes, he did attend college. He has his PhD. And he may argue with me and say that it is his PhD that allowed him to begin and run such a fruitful business. However, he still has the business. And I think he's such a bright man and such a steadfast person that he could have done this business, the recycling business, without going to college. Now, he may argue with me on that, but again, seeing his business as fruitful as it is, and him being able to establish fundraisers in order to support our community is inspiring like no other. And so I intend to do the same. I have already began my own business, my butcher shop business. It's doing well. I hope for it to do better. I'm closing on a new space in August to operate out of. And I intend to do more of that. But not only that, I intend to be more of like an incubator or a hub for more of our youth members in the community to encourage entrepreneurship, to encourage business, because that is what's going to truly get us the property and the land that we need to exist as a community. A lot of the other cultures do it. They come here as immigrants, they start businesses. Yes, their children go to college, The children come back and they're able to do things within the business because of their college education. But the first thing they do when they get here is they open businesses and they run them well. And so that is my vision for the future. That is what I will be involved in wholeheartedly, is encouraging entrepreneurship. Thank you. If anyone has any.
So let me respond real quickly. So yes, in terms of education and having a doctorate degree, it really was a necessary step in order for me to do what I'm doing now. So I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, even when I was in college. But had I not been in that position, I would have never opened up the business. Because the reason that I opened up the business is because the students that I was working with were struggling and they could not afford college. So because as a researcher, as of this things that I've done, it was something that inspired me to open up the business. The education part is critical, you know, understanding the language of business, understanding what a cash flow statement is, understanding financial statements, understanding balance sheets, understanding all those things that are required. So when you're going to banks and you're talking to them about these type of things, they are aware of that you're knowledgeable. So the education piece is important. So I don't want you to think like, well, he got a PhD and he didn't have to have a PhD to get this business. He could have just started it. No, that actually was a critical step. And now that I'm in my position, I can help you. So you don't have to get a PhD. You understand what I'm saying? You don't have to get a PhD because you have a community, you have someone in your community, in your circle that can help you skip those steps. My father was a bus driver. He didn't have enough knowledge to tell me the things that I needed so that I would not have to go through that. But he did encourage me because he planted the seed for the recycling when I was 13, 14 years old. So, you know, everything has its steps. So your generation and the kids that are coming after you, yeah, you have a resource in your community where I can talk to you and tell you this is what you can do, X, Y, and Z. You don't have to go through all the stuff that I went through getting a PhD to do some of these things. So, I mean, it's an important step in terms of my development as a person, in terms of the things that I've had to learn. But now that I've learned that knowledge and I've gathered, I can share it with you to make you better, and you can shortcut some of those things that are doing. So, and if you look at those other communities, those people are coming here with a knowledge base. We're not having it, we're developing it now.
Thank you, Uncle Kwesi.
Hello, everyone. So the topic of entrepreneurship or going to college is going to be talked about in the next slide. But we also have to talk about continuing the conversation about visions for the future. So one question that comes up is, how are we actively going to work to preserve the culture as the elders passed? Because that's inevitable. So I believe that we should learn what we can now. When I say we learn what we can, like the youth, we should actively listen and we should pay attention to the way things are established. So we should listen to our elders and what they talk about. I also believe that we should teach our future kids traditions, and we should tell them about the elders, who we looked up to and why, like, you know, our favorite aunties or uncles, and why we looked up to them, what we liked about them. I also believe that we should talk about books a lot. We should read them, keep them, and the books should be from accredited sources, because there's the topic about like the person who's telling the story. Like, it depends on, like, the narrator of the story is going to influence how the story is being told. So you want to make sure that the source is accredited. Another question is, what is it that people are looking for that will allow the culture to supplement what they need and desire? So something we touched upon earlier is that not everybody is looking for the same thing. Not everyone is looking for the spiritual aspect. Some people are just looking for a community that they can bond with. Some people just want a sense of identity. And then yes, some people want the spiritual aspect. And I also believe that we should emphasize the process of warming someone up to the culture. So when someone comes to an Akom for the first time, they may not know what's going on. And we often have like a welcoming attitude that we emphasize. And I think that can really help. We should offer to answer questions. We should get people accustomed. And also, we should be approachable. We shouldn't make people feel like dumb or ignorant because of the questions they ask. So, yes. That's basically what we should emphasize. Why should we encourage venturing off to college? Staying home, it may seem ideal, but I feel like we should branch out and then bring back like what we learned from school and bring it back home. And getting away from home allows us to learn new things and stop living in a bubble. We interact with new people. We learn new things, not just educational things, but we learn things about society, how other people operate, not just people within our community. And I feel like that's important to bring back home.
Excellently said. I agree with that 100%. Going on and continue, I'm probably going to touch on that a little bit more, but to start off, and as you all heard from my fellow presenters, the spiritual and the social dynamics of the Akom culture, both are embodied within the culture and interact with each other, but they're not the same. So my question is, how do we give each of them their respective attention? I think it's been kind of a common theme that this culture, Akoms in America, is not, it can be mistaken for a religion. I thought it was a religion. I believe that it is a religion. I've been raised with that ideal in my mind since I was young. But I look at culture as a whole, and this conversation of us being African American and Black Americans, half, if not 75% of the young men in this culture play Guinea drumming. They all play djembe drumming. That's not Akom. You feel me? So I say that to say that we should acknowledge and choose the things that are feeding our spirit and not say anything is one versus another. I think that within the culture, sometimes people who don't come to our home or don't participate in our home don't feel as if they're Akom. And I'm glad to say that I have some friends who don't feel that way at all, and they never come to our home. They never come, for anything spiritual. But if you see them in the street in Brooklyn or something, they identify 100% wholeheartedly as Akom. And maybe you never saw them at any event, any Akom event, but that doesn't change the way in which they identify themselves. So maybe what they get out of being Akom is more of the social aspect that social identity, which fortifies their spirit. So now the way in which they choose to express their Akomism is onto them. It might not be, come in to drum or come in to dance, but they still walk with that identity with them no matter where they go. So I think that we should have more events, events that just kind of celebrate all the parts of our culture, whether it be jazz, whether it be Guinean dancing, whether it be hip hop, all of the different things that our culture as Akoms in America is an amalgamation of. I think that all of those things need to be respected. And I think that is one way in which we would feel as youth, and I don't mean to speak for anyone, but that we are giving reverence to the Black Americans who came and were forced to express their culture in a different way, or was forced to kind of mold their culture in a different way and mold the culture of the world, because everybody follows Black culture. Everybody is a product of Black culture. And so I say that to say, going on to the next point, how do we rebrand the culture for ourselves and our communities? How is the culture advertised and portrayed? And how do we connect with the Black community? Like Fruit of Islam. FOI is Fruit of Islam, for those who don't know. There's some people that I follow on social media, Riza Islam, Danique Star. These are young people, young people with fruit of Islam, and they might be out there rapping, they might be out there just spreading knowledge, writing books, this, that, and the third, but they all identify as the same thing. The way they express that thing is different. We all can identify as Akan, especially Akans in America, and the way in which we express it may be different. So what is the common principle as to why we are Akan? What's the common principle that is the source of our action and our activity and our pride? I wear African garb top to bottom with a do-rag on plenty of times. And it's people that see me in a whole lot of different spaces and areas, and I'm very confident in myself. I'm very confident because, the culture has given me that foundation, but I think I was also privy to certain things that other people weren't privy to. I think also, I don't think that it was like that all the time for me. Me maturing, it took years, going through school and having to deal with being the only African booty scratcher, and it wasn't always very smooth. It wasn't always something that, if you as a young adolescent growing up and having to interact with all of these different cultures and all of these different people, sometimes it wasn't the most proud engendering thing, because kids are cruel, man. Kids are cruel, man. They'll make fun of you for anything and everything. So I think that there's a certain level of trauma that's attached to that, and I think that branding as a culture, branding what it is that makes us a collective, what it is that brings us together, no matter how we express it differently, but knowing exactly what it is that we have in common is very important. And I think that for the youth especially, that it needs to be reinforced, or it needs to be just spoken about more, and just so that the youth can feel more confident in their self and their expression of their culture. The next point, spiritual guidance outside of Akom. I think this is a very, very important topic, and I love, as we know, the other topic aside from the youth meeting is acupuncture and spirituality. And I know, man, I'm looking like, dang, man, why that had to be on the same day? Because that's something that I would be interested in. I think for the youth, we kind of, you see spirituality as you have to be a konfo to be spiritual. In which ways is our individual spirituality reinforced without having to go through training, or without having to go through the lines? Like, outside of going through those lines of training, or being a konfo, or being a priest, or being of service to your community in that way, if I'm just someone who just wants to come in and relax, and that wasn't the case with me. I was very, very deep into shrine life, shrine time. So I'm not speaking from my experience, but rather some of the experiences that I witnessed from some of my peers. Is like, do you still come here, and is your spiritual health and wellness reinforced outside of coming to this one event where we drum and sing and we praise entities and deities? How do we enliven that same energy within ourselves? How do I make a shrine out of my brother or my sister? How do I the same way, if someone could come and pour and speak life and speak love and speak so much engenderness when they go to the pot, and so much passion and genuine sincerity and love and appreciation to a shrine, how do we do that for each other? How is my spiritual health reinforced in if I just walk in a room, if it's not a spiritual event, And I think that is something that needs to be at least touched upon, spoken about, because I feel like that is a reason why a lot of people shy away. They feel as if, or I don't know, I can't even say, I'm just assuming that might be a reason why some people might shy away. If they're not super into Akom and dancing and drumming, then they're not spiritual, and I know that's not what's meant to be said, or I know that's not the message that's meant to be put out, but it can be received that way. So I think that's an important factor to, within the future to clarify, or to just, do different projects. I love Agile Parry with the Seeds of Renewal, the yoga, the the yoni steaming, the vegan eating, that, you know, but bringing on all of these kind of different forms of wellness that might not necessarily have originated from Ghana, West Africa, but they can also be an influence of how we carry and how we hold ourselves here in America as a continent America. Next, the value of education, trades, and entrepreneurship. As Dr. Kwesi Omoa had mentioned to us earlier, he would not have opened his business had it not been for some of the experiences that he went through. And I think he worded it beautifully. He went and got a PhD so that y'all don't have to get a PhD. I don't want to get a PhD. I don't want to keep feeding this system, but you know, certain things that I might have to do. I might have to get another degree just for what my field is in. But I think that there's an extreme value in trades that is underlying that isn't expressed. You know how much a plumber costs, or an electrician, or a carpenter, and having those skills and those tools would be invaluable. And if we had that within our community even more, then that just shows how much more you know, just how much more powerful that we would be, how much more tools in our tool chest we would have to build our community. So I think that there should be an even I guess expression of importance on going to college, and if you're not going to college, getting a trade, and if not, even with the trade, with both the college and the trade, starting a business. You know, I don't think it's a versus thing. I don't think it's college versus entrepreneurship. I think both can feed each other, or one hand washes the other and both hands wash the face. So unity is a product of bringing two diverse individual things that might not look like one another, act like one another, and to work with one another. You know, and I think that we should really emphasize the importance of education, of course, college. I think it is important. Even self-education, you can learn everything in college on YouTube. Trades and entrepreneurship. I think that all three of those things should all be emphasized, and their individual importance and how they can connect with one another should be emphasized. How to operate in two multi-religion households. That one is a little bit, you know, tricky, but I think it's something that needs to be said and expressed. I think that there's a lot of hidden kind of trauma that surrounds that, you know, that surrounds that topic. And for some people, maybe it's more pronounced. For some people, maybe it's less pronounced. But for youth growing up, it's hard to even have to think that you have to choose one versus another, you know. And it's like, how can we have within our households kind of a respect and a mutual understanding for both, because these are all ways in which people explain God or explain connection to that divine source, that divine creator. So I think it would be better to identify the commonalities as opposed to the differences. You know, I think that we shouldn't identify the differences, but we all also know the history of Christianity. We know the history of Islam, and we know that everything isn't always clean. And I think that we should still emphasize that each person is responsible for their connection to God. I appreciate the culture, and for me, religion, as I was growing up, because that's what I saw it as. And the reason why I appreciated it most, because I was able to meet someone who was Hindu and be like, oh snap, y'all got deities too? I got deities too. Meet somebody that was from a whole different spectrum of what I thought of religiously, and understand that there was something that was in common. So it allowed me to be very open-minded with religion, and it allowed me to accept people no matter what religion they practice, no matter what God, what expression of God in which they choose to pray to. So I think that the conversation between living in multi-religious houses should be focused on. And the last, boys' rites of passage, girls' rites of passage. I can't speak on the girls' rites of passage because I'm not a girl. I don't identify as a girl either, you know. but boys' rites of passage, I can say that there's more that we can do as a youth, as one of the older youths, I'll say. The Sappho camping trip, which was a renewal or revival of the Kofi Koto camping trip. It wasn't really a rites of passage, but it feels like that, especially for the young men that participate in it. And I think that with this topic being said, I myself will dedicate to being more, I guess, direct in terms of making sure, I mean, I already do that naturally, making sure that the young men that's around me, they're learning certain lessons and they're building their confidence in themselves, you know, regardless. And I think that there's certain principles that are taught, but I feel like having, and Bonsu, Kofi Bonsu and Amankwa, they did have a rites of passage for young boys a few years back. And I don't know how long they continued it, but I think that both of them is something that's important. For the girls who went through rites of passages, who went through Yagorba, you know, maybe you can comment on the efficiency, if you liked it, if you didn't like it. You know, I don't really have any comments on that. I just know that it's important. I know that it is important. And without it, you know, you kind of lack a cultural identity. So that is my 2 cents. And we will bring it over to, whose slide is this? Asia's? No, Afia.
Did someone want to comment on puberty rights or no? Should I keep going?
Yeah. So I participated in puberty rights when I was a young girl, and it was phenomenal. It truly opened my eyes up to the Akom culture, and I think it's definitely something we should continue to do. My only thing with that is I think we should have a follow-up session, have a reunion, quote on say, because going on with some of the stuff that Perry said, I come from a household of 2 religions. My mother, Dana Amasewa, is a part of the Akom culture. However, my father is not. He was raised and born in Alabama with Christianity. And so that's why I kind of really want to emphasize again on the importance of our virtual presence that we're having. Do not forget about the virtual presence, because ever since our virtual Akoms and virtual activities that you all have had, I've never heard anything related to Akom. Not that I haven't, my mom speaks about it here and there, but I get to hear it once a week, whether I'm fully listening or not, but to hear Nana, to hear Yao, to hear those words that are a part of our culture really makes a difference for me. It allows me to think more about it, bring more attention to it, because otherwise I would just continue on with life and forget the importance of this. So again, I want to highlight the importance of having this virtual environment, but also saying that we really do need to have a follow-up with our puberty rights, because that's kind of all. I know the songs and the dances specific to puberty rights, but nothing aside from that. It's a phenomenal experience. So much fun.
All right, I guess I'll keep it going. And I can just add to that conversation. I didn't go through puberty rights because I grew up in a dually religious household. My mom is Christian, my dad isn't. And so my mom wasn't comfortable with me going through it without having certain questions answered. And so for a while, I felt like I had really missed out on something. So I think we don't have to create an environment where like puberty rights is like this like end all that be all, but like building lots of these different social experiences that we've been talking about throughout this presentation. So for me, in terms of visions for the future, I really was asking 2 questions. What do you get out of the culture today, and what would you like to get out of the culture tomorrow? And so I have a couple of quotes here from different people from our group with what you get out of the culture today. And so these just some snippets. I love a good bath. I get confidence, skills, and money. A community that is a large extended family and network of Pan-Africanists, a sense of peace and security, and an extended family from the culture. And I think so that's something that we all pretty much resonated on, which is that we all have a sense of family and community from what has grown over the last 3 generations. Is that we are all family. We have aunties in every corner of the world, and anywhere we need to go, we have somebody we can call on. And so answering this question of what you'd like to get out of the culture tomorrow is sometimes a little bit more difficult. And so some of the things that were said were a community that builds generational wealth and supports one another in different aspects of life. I wish to have grandchildren with hopes of them benefiting from our culture further. I'm honestly not sure. I don't know if I see myself in the culture in the future. I would like to see more inclusiveness. It's time to expand and share this community with people outside of ourselves, and gain a stronger understanding of the foundations, meaning, and purpose of the culture to build a spiritual connection. And I think so much of what you get out of those few quotes is that there's more than the spiritual, there's more than the religious aspects of what we want to get out of this community, right? So much of what we love about this community is that we have all of our aunties and uncles and all these different people we can call on from different walks of life. And while we're not Christian, while we're not a church, I think one thing the church does well is that the church has ministries.
Beginning now on the young people. All right, bye.
Pacho, answer, can you mute yourself? Because we heard your conversation.
Oh, I am so sorry.
Oh, good. Hey, Grandma.
I did to see my granddaughter, that's all, you know.
But what the church does well in many ways is the church has ministries, right? The church has the parking ministry, right? And I think it's important that we have different types of, if we don't want to call it ministries, what are ways that we can make sure that we're getting more out of this community than having family and having a Combs, right? And so the question is, like, do we have like an activism ministry? Like, what types of this youth ministry? Like, we created this youth collective over these past few weeks, and it's been great to hear everyone's different opinions, but let's make this institutional. And that's kind of what I want to see for the future, is creating some institutional, just like some borders, some boundaries, something that's firm that we can grab onto and be like, that's where I want to be today. That's who I want to talk to today, and not feel like there's a barrier to access. And so I really want us to continue to think about what it means to say, like, what do you get out of the culture today? And what would you like to get out of the culture tomorrow? And if that's in our mind every day when we're talking about how to grow this community, then we'll get somewhere. But if we continue to focus on like what we get out of the culture today, then we'll forget about the future and what we want to build.
Well said.
Thanks.
Okay.
I could keep talking, Asha, if you want.
Okay. I was just gonna agree with you. That's all. Just,
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that says a lot in terms of how we go back and get our other brothers and sisters that don't necessarily have the same advantage and blessing that we do of being birthed and raised into this community, into this culture. So by creating whatever we decide to call them, little groups or whatever that do certain things that go back and help our other brothers and sisters that are outside of this community right now, to bring them in, to give them a more family, to give them that spiritual guidance that so many are searching for, to just rebuild and reestablish that is a great way to do that, by having these ministries or what have you, where we're just able to give back and understand that our community is great, but it can be better when we bring others in, when we expand. So yes.
Yeah, and I think a big thing is not only like bringing others in, but it's also finding ways to keep those that are here.
Yeah.
Because part of the discussion we were having as the youth on this call is to say, like, we all appreciate Akom culture in a lot of different ways, and Akom spirituality and religion, but the question is, will we be here in the next 10 years? Are we going to be the leaders, or are we going to take a step back? And what does it mean that so many of us don't necessarily want to take a leadership role in this community, right? Like, we have to be open, we have to be honest with one another and open to developing and changing. And sometimes when you're surrounded by people who don't necessarily want to hear all of the different opinions that you may have, whether they're good or bad, so that we can discuss them, it doesn't feel like a place where you want to stay. And so we have to make this a family in a way that we encourage conversation regularly.
Yeah, and I will second that in saying that if we don't walk in a realm of open-mindedness and understand where each other is coming from and be able to or evolve and adapt, then truthfully, I'm not sure how much longer this culture can survive without the adaptation, without the growth, without the continuation of, bringing traditions forward, but also creating new ones, with also bringing the influence, and what does that change look like for the future? Because future is through adaptation, through growth. And if right now for me, it feels very stagnant, and growing up and just seeing the same things happen over and over again within my 23 years of life. What does that look like for 23 years now, especially if the youth essentially is supposed to be the people that take on that next step and that next chapter? And it feels like we're in a place where we want to learn, we want to understand, we want to know the traditions, we want that knowledge, but we're also coming with knowledge of how the world is moving on the outside from the younger standpoint. So how do we merge the two so that this culture and this community continues to flourish and thrive?
I'll go on and add that a lot of what I've been hearing is how this, when are we going to have this, who's there to do this, we should have this. That, I think, is a very bad thing to do. If there's anything that you want in your community, inside of your family, things that you would like to see done, it's up to you to go ahead and create that. It sounds like a lot of complaining to me, and I'm not looking to play devil's advocate here and tarnish this, but if you want that, you have to go ahead and do it. I mean, specifically, I'll give you an example, and this is for not just for our group, but I'm speaking in general here. A lot of the camping trips that my older brothers like Opari and Kofi and them would get to go on, those camping trips came to an end before I was of age to go on the trips. And so what did I do? I started the camping trips back up, and I took the young boys that came after me on the trips. I didn't sit there and complain and say, why isn't there anything for the young boys? Why isn't there this? I want to see that. I said, okay, I wasn't able to participate in that, but what I can do is I can put my foot down and start it up again. There's several things that I would like to see done within the community, but the last thing that I'll ever do is ask who's going to do it? How are we going to do it? If the idea comes to you, that means it's up to you to do it. That's why it came to you, because you're thinking of it. So it's up to you to act it out and get it started. And so I'm saying this so that you don't talk in circles here. If you guys have ideas or things that you want to see done, go ahead and do it. Plan it out. See if there's other people that have the same mindset as you, but it's up to you to go ahead and do this. So please, let's not sit here and just say when, why, how, why not. Get it done.
Yeah, I think I appreciate your comment, but I also want to point out that we are on the slide about our concrete solutions about what we want to do moving forward, right? So we've had our discussions about what our visions are and what we would like to see change. And so what we said is, this is what we're about to do moving forward, right? And you've been a part of those conversations. And so for you to see it as just complaining and not us creating concrete solutions for how we're going to keep going, I think, I don't know if you're not listening to what we're talking about, but Asha and I have been discussing planning a retreat for the young woman. And then we talked as a group about creating these youth open calls for the next few weeks. And that's what Asha's going to talk about. I don't want to take away from her slide, but we have been having that holistic conversation. And so I don't want you to take away from the holistic conversation that we have been doing.
Yeah, and I will also, I don't think that Yao is incorrect in what he's saying. I agree. But I also feel like throughout this slide, one thing that we've been talking about is if we're talking about community and the people that we're going to have behind us, it needs to still be an era of open-mindedness and willing to adapt and willing to change. Because yes, we can say we want to do a women's retreat, but if none of the women want to do it, it's just going to be a little vacation between me and Afia, and that it's different. And if we're trying to work in this communal aspect, I do agree, like, yes, we need to be active, we need to be doing things, but also it is a we. And if we're going to move forward as a collective, then we need to understand where each other's mindsets are. We need to have these conversations. We need to continuously be open
for the conversation we just had 20 minutes ago about going back and forth between Black, that was a dialogue happening where we're understanding people's opinion, and then we can move forward and we can evolve. Now I know something about someone else's opinion that I didn't know before. So now I can process that differently and plan to move X, Y, and Z. So I want to say that our conversations are not about staying stagnant. It's not about I'm just complaining and I'm doing this, that, and the third. I want to have a conversation so that way, if I do choose to move and create and expand, I know how to move properly and efficiently. I can't move without the knowledge of the other side. I can't move without knowing what my community is thinking and feeling. So if we're going to better it, we need to understand where everyone's at. On that note, I would like to have monthly and bi-weekly youth calls. We all discussed that. Just like Deja was saying earlier, just as a way for us to touch base with each other, for us to be able to talk about our experiences. We discussed how it is growing up, having our names, and it's just a different type of communication that we're able to have with each other, that when we're discussing our elders and we're discussing the future and we're discussing about who we want to talk to for X, Y, and Z, and you can refer an auntie, you can refer an uncle for me to go to. It's about us as the youth establishing a bond and a connection with each other, so that way our relationships with the elders can continue to grow. Also, a women's retreat, I honestly just think would be really amazing. All of us talked about it. We see the men go camping, and if there has been a women's retreat, I just didn't know about it. And if anyone has information on it, please let us know. But I think it's about more than having one once a year or every couple of months. It's how are we going to continue that relationship and that bond? And I think that these retreats and these phone calls or get-togethers are a way for us to grow our communal experience within each other. Yeah. Right. What does the future hold? Broader ideas. Financial stability, which a lot of us discuss. Community emergency fund to help the community members in need within the culture, outside the culture, just because we all go through hardships. We never know what's going to happen. So for us to have something that can help each other, support each other, would just be phenomenal, honestly. Open dialogue about how we help others that are not involved in the con community. What are we doing to give back on the outside? Again, if we have these small ministries, if we're protesting on the outside, I'm a big protester, I'm out there all the time. So it's finding ways that we can also expose this community, this culture that we've had, this brilliance that we've had, and then bring other people in. Growing the community with an open heart and mind. Again, this whole PowerPoint for the youth was to express how we're feeling, to show our opinion, for everyone in this particular PowerPoint right now to get a view of how everyone else is looking at things, so that way we can grow, we can expand, we can have dialogue. So I don't want this to be something where now we're wrong because of having our opinion, because it's not that way. We can only move forward if we're open to having a dialogue, and we can agree to disagree on certain things, but we need to be able to have those conversations without the other side feeling like their opinions don't matter, feeling like they're shut out, because then from there, why would I want to be a part of something that is not fully accepting my opinion, my body, my mind, but I'm supposed to come in a Akom in this environment where it's not open, I can't express myself the way I want to. So what does that family actually mean and look like? And this is my experience, this is the experience of a few of the other youth members, and we're just here to express that, so that way we're able to develop, we're able to create bonds and relationships. It's not in a way to say one side is wrong, one side is right, but it's about the conversation of how we're expanding, how we're going to evolve together as a community, as a we. Moving with the times, extending our hands, and more college graduates or entrepreneurs. And like Opera said, you can do both. I'm going to school right now for acting, but I know about lighting design, I know about directing, I know about costumes, makeup. It's a whole thing where we get to experience other looks and walks of life that I've been blessed to go to college and had parents and family to support me to go do those things. But now I can bring that knowledge back to my community. And if someone needs to do a photo shoot, or someone needs help with lights, or how to do something for a show, we have so many shows with the Sasia, the dance shows, that and if I ever needed to run a light board or call a show, I could do that. It's things like that we need to continuously have these conversations to understand where each other's mindsets are, what people want to become, so that way the community can grow and expand in the way that we all, from what I'm gathering, we all feel is truly necessary. So we're here to create that dialogue, to open the conversations so that we all can do it together. So it is when our elders pass, the youth is there to have the knowledge, to know how to expand, to know how to operate, and for the elders that are there to be able to take the youth's opinions and mold and create this environment where we're going to be able to have this for generations upon generations to come. And that's the end. If anyone would like to tag team and wrap it up again.
Okay, it's about 7, so we're wrapping it up really, really quickly.
Great.
First, I want to say that I'm floored. I'm so impressed with your ideas, your expressions, your passion. It's overwhelming just to hear the positivity and the future, to see you guys. It's nothing but encouraging. And this presentation was an excellent dialogue. It shows different views and different thoughts from all walks of life and experiences, and it's nothing but encouraging. So I commend you all. I look forward to hearing so much more from what you do individually to what you do as a group. And I know this group has some tensions here and there, but that is life. So that is definitely, it's definitely a way for you guys to grow. So it's very encouraging to hear the youth and to see your education and your passion. I'm just so overwhelmed, and I'm so glad to be a part of this. And this session is recorded, so one of the things I wanted to do, I wanted to read a little bit some of the questions and thoughts that were going on while you were talking. One of the ones were saying that this, a couple of people were telling me that they wish that this session wasn't with another session with the spirituality and acupuncture. So again, this is our first time going through this. So one of the comments were that we want to hear from our youth so we can support them. So we will definitely take that into consideration and make sure that the youth program next year, which there will be, is designed to where everybody can actually come and contribute and hear your voices. One of the comments were made from Nana Kwabena Brown. He said that the discussion was great and relevant. And he mentioned that we, at the end of slavery and even before, made strong attempts at entrepreneurship. He says that this is a great initiative to talk about, and we have had some successes. However, we also faced a lot of opposition. Another comment was, everyone follows Black culture in some manner. I love what Auntie Sewa said here. When we feed our guests, we are also feeding their souls and meeting their spiritual needs. And I believe Apari said something to that nature. Another comment was, in listening to the youth, how do we keep them engaged and active in the culture and moving forward? That is the question. So one of the things that you guys were speaking of was being allowed to have your voices heard, and how do you move forward? So the question pretty much is, how do we as elders and other people in the community keep you engaged in order to move forward? I would like to hear from Afia. I know I'm gonna pronounce your last name. You know I'm coming for you.
Anoche.
Anoche. Yes, I would like to hear some of your thoughts.
I feel like, just like I said earlier, just being approachable, letting our voices be heard, pretty much.
I am. Go ahead. That's it, just letting your voices be heard?
Mm-hmm.
If I may add, and adding with some of the...
Come with me, ride with me.
Go ahead. Ms. Bandy?
Yes, she also added that books are a great resource. And I also want to say, yes, indeed, books are amazing. But we know the saying is, if you want to hide anything from an African-American, throw it in a book. And so, of course, we should encourage our children to read books. But not only that, but African-Americans, Black people, whatever word we're choosing to use, we are very creative minds. We all know that. And I think the easiest way to kind of get to our youth is to do something creatively. Again, using our virtual platform, watching videos, just doing something aside from reading, because that's already a component that we had and that we are trying to use a bit more than we did previously. But I think trying to engage in a creative way and starting with technology and moving forward with videos and connections like that are very impactful.
I would also like to add what's worked for me is being around, and not just being around, but being helpful, assisting the elders, helping them with things, and constantly being around. Through that, they gain a genuine respect for your opinions, ideas that you might have. Again, this is from my own experience. That's what's worked for me. So if there's any youth out there that has the wish of being heard more, I think that's a suggestion. That is a suggestion that I would give you, is to be around more, be consistent, be helpful, listen, and your opinions will be heard.
I just want to make sure I have the question right. It's how do we keep the youth engaged and active to help move the culture forward, right?
No,
Yes, that was primarily part of the question. But before we go started, I just want everybody to know that the session is officially ended, but we want to thank you guys for your presentation. However, because conversation is continuing, I would like to invite you guys to continue in your discussion.
Okay, cool. So for me, like, yeah, I completely agree with you. For people who are able to stay, but for example, for me right now, like, I'm in California in school, pursuing other things, and I would love to continue to be engaged and be active. So one thing that Deja said about technology that I think has been great thus far with the quarantine is being able to have the Zoom sessions on Akom songs, the sessions on dancing, because it's information that I think needs to be had. And how do we continually do that throughout the year and not have it be, okay, we have this summer thing of Akom Kese where we'll all get together, let's all talk about one things. How do we continue to be engaging? And I think it starts with technology. Honestly, what we have right now is being able to say, okay, we're going to set up the Zoom call. Let's let everybody know. Let's just check in with each other, for example, for number one. Or we're going to have this Akom song session, or we're going to have the session if you want us to do one on butchery. Guys, I'm going to do a Zoom session and show you guys how I cut my meat. It's things like little things like that that we're able to see what other people are doing. I could even do, hey guys, if anyone wants to know how to work proper lighting or how to do a call board or something like that, it's going to be communally being able to give options and come together and say, well, I'm going to do this session. Who do you think is interested? And then moving from there to start at least. And then whenever the world opens back up, maybe we can figure out some physical in-person activities. But I think that that would be a great way to start, to make sure that we're doing stuff throughout the year, because I know stuff gets tricky with schedules and work and life, but what is it to have a check-in with each other every 2 months? Does you know what I mean, as a group, versus it being like, the elders are talking here, the youth, the couple of us are chit-chat on the side, to really establish a familial energy greater than what we already have. I think is possible through that.
Well, that being said, I want to task you all with doing just that. Once every 2 months, get together, come together, have a session such as this where people can log on and engage in the conversation.
And we will be starting those youth session meetings. Hopefully our goal is to start them in September, once a couple of us have already established our school schedules with the virtual, but we do plan on moving forward with those youth sessions. So keep an eye out. I'll have my dad send like a massive email to everyone who was involved in Akom Kese this year, but those will be coming for sure.
Okay, I wanted to read a couple of more comments. Nana Kwesi Ajaman says that this was an excellent session and he thanks you all for sharing. Nana Kofi says, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Nana Ansa Ajaman says, great discussion and so proud of you coming up with the solutions. You are our future and we need your minds, bodies, and spirits to carry the culture forward. How can us elders help with this process?
So I'd like to say that the minute someone is born older than you, they are your elder. And so I know I said Uncle Yao funny, and it was very funny to the group, but he is in a sense my elder because he is older than me, and so he has something that he can teach me. He learned how to breathe in the air a year, seconds, minutes before me. So anybody is really your elder, but for those elders, I think it's really important for you to tap into the potential of your young people. So I'm really going to speak from experience. If it really wasn't for Yao and Asha for giving me this opportunity to present, I wouldn't be as involved as I am right now or today. And I think really just giving a personal connection, say, hey, how are you doing? And then from, hey, how are you doing? Say, hey, there's this event, you should look into it. And at first they may be like, oh my gosh, this old person's asking me to do this and attend this event or whatever it is, but they're gonna look into it a little bit because you asked them personally, you reached out to them, you're trying to see what they're doing. And I think something like that really goes a long way. And I really encourage you to help with the process of reaching out to the young folks, is actually reaching to them out personally and saying, I see this potential in you, and I think this will help you with what you want to do and what you plan on doing, and you need to learn more about this to learn more about yourself.
I think I would like to just point out that last summer's Akom Kese had a we broke out into like a women's session and a men's session, and the women's session I think was like one of the most profound experiences that like Asha, I, and Afia were like ever a part of. Like we loved it, but it was something that had never existed before. And so something so simple as putting us all in one room and saying just talk was eye-opening. And so I think anyone who wants to host those conversations moving forward with the veil of complete transparency, with the veil of saying whatever stays here, whatever we discuss here stays here, and let's just be open. Let's be a family in whatever way you want to be a family. I think that's how we really build that community with the elders. Because that was, to this day, we still talk about it because we had a lot of fun and didn't expect to. We're all sitting in a circle. And that is such an easily replicable concept, but we just need an elder to lead it in some ways. We could lead it, but in some ways there's not always the same respect. So we have to have those types of initiatives.
Okay. Another comment is, I'm so glad to hear the thoughts of the youth. They are thoughtful and engaging and expressing their ideas and carrying on the culture. And I have a lot of respect for them. Madasi pa 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 to all of you. You did a great job, and I have a lot of hope for the future. And I believe that.
Mipacho, this Auntie Sewa, I just wanted to say I enjoyed it tremendously.
Auntie Sewa, can we see you?
Oh. Okay, I am. I enjoyed it. I tried to not be on because I know that sometimes people have anxiety when they can see people looking at them. So, but I just want to say I enjoyed it tremendously. I just wanted to know, is there an age range for the youth when y'all meet? Because I know that some of y'all are at one age, then you got a little bit here, then you have another group that might be like 12 or, you know, something like that. Is there any age range where you would invite young people that are in our community to come in and just, you know, y'all can just chat?
I think those are two separate calls in some ways that we've been talking about. The call that we've had as a collective, as the 6 of us, is pretty much 18 to 30. But the goal for the bi-weekly or monthly call that we'll have as a quote unquote youth is primarily aimed at under 18 to foster community amongst all of us. So correct me if I'm wrong. Anyone else?
But essentially, yes, both, where we can have one for 18 and below, and then one for 18 to 30. Or we're able to obviously talk about different things we would 18 to 30 than we would, or 17 to 30 than we would that and below. So I think we could have both, honestly. We can have one every 2 weeks, one for the older, one for the younger.
And you guys would facilitate the younger group?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to kind of in a point that we shared earlier, that we really want to emphasize that it's important to do both entrepreneurship and college. But I heard a lot of people say with college PhD, college does not equal PhD. You can go to college and get a master's, you can go to college and get a bachelor's or an associate's degree. So I do love the point that we shared, that my elder did go to college and get their PhD and then created this business for me to go and not further and get a PhD either. But that doesn't mean I can't go and get a bachelor's and then continue to push forward with this new business that my family decided to put forth for ourselves. I think it's really important to do both, because college and universities and education isn't just for learning per se, it's for the opportunity to network and meet other people. You know, you can learn right in your household. Your father got the PhD, he can teach you everything you gotta know, you know? But it's super important to go out there and to meet other people. If you're in this house that's solely just Akom culture, Akom everything, Akom cooking, culture, whatever it is, everything in between, then that's all you're gonna know. But you can't be a well-rounded person if you don't go and meet and make friends that are Asian Americans, meet and make friends that are Pacific Islanders, and meet different people. That makes you a more unique and beautiful you. You learn from other people, and you learn how to conversate with other people. And so I think it's really important to share this quote: let's work, let's play, let's live, together, because once you do that, you're able to communicate with other people. When you go to college, you're able to work with other people, you're able to play with other people, you're able to live with it. You got a roommate possibly, you know, someone that's not from the same background as you, and that opens your world up to a different perspective and allows you to have dialogue where you can share your viewpoint with someone else's viewpoint, because you understand kind of where they're coming from in their footsteps. And that's why I value both education and entrepreneurship, because within your own business, you can encourage your own beliefs and culture that you're doing while going to school and learning about what you're passionate about, and learning about other people to, again, push forward with your ideas.
Well, Ms. Bandy, that was well said, and I think I will end on that. So thank you all for being so gracious presenters, and I'm so excited to see what comes next for you all. So thank you again, and have a good night.
Bye.
Peace and love.
Guys.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thanks for
Proud of
listening.
you guys. Proud of you guys.